back on a stage that, yeah, well, it's not quite the same stage, but you know, really good to be back. Whoa, 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 whoa. Dobry ranku. How's it going, everyone? Woo! That and Dyakuyu is 100% of my Ukrainian. So I know that this is going to be recorded, and for the people on YouTube, I am aware that my Ukrainian can be improved. Feel free to help me with that. Also feel free, like everyone here, feel free to just, you know, teach me new phrases. Last year when I was here, someone spoke Russian to me, and I'm like, oh, I know that language. And I'm like, basically, I get super excited when I learn new things. So recently I learned a new Russian phrase that they tell kids when they're going to eat, right? So I'm not sure if Ukrainian has that as well. Probably it has. I don't think British people and American people have that. But in Germany, when we have like the kids at the table and we go for like dinner or lunch or whatever with them, there's a phrase that we are saying, like you take each other's hand and you go, piep, 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 wir haben uns alle lieb, guten Appetit, which you do not have to remember. There's not going to be a test at the end, don't worry. But apparently the Russians say, gusi gusi ga ga ga, yes khatitye da da da. And I learned that, thank you. And I learned that phrase, and I was super excited. So what do? I go around town and basically like random people are having like conversations and I'm like, hey Martin, how are you doing? And I go, gusi gusi ga ga ga, yes khatitye da da da. And they're like, okay, ooh, right? So if I do that, don't be afraid. I'm not mentally troubled or something. So back to the technical bits. I know they're boring, but we gotta do them, right? So today I'd like to talk about Polymer, but I think to understand what Polymer really brings to the table, by the way, who here has worked with Polymer before? Nah, it's not very many people. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. You should. Anyway, we're going to start with vanilla web components, and we're going to have a look at what's the things. So I've been working with web components since 2014 when they were in their early stages, because I like to live on the edge, and I do not recommend that necessarily, but it's interesting. And it allows us developers, if you work with something that is experimental in your free time or in your projects or in internal projects, it allows us to find out where things are not good. What, as developers, we don't like. Who here has worked with IndexedDB? No one? Wow, lucky you. So the thing is, sometimes when people are designing APIs for the browser, we later on then complain. It's like, oh God, this is complicated. Why is it so hard? Who here remembers having to do like tables or images, like these transparent GIFs for having rounded borders? Yeah, right? And we're like, why does no one fix that? And the thing was, people were trying to fix it. It's just like, it's very hard to figure out what developers want if you're a browser developer. You're like, okay, I know how I can make this platform nice and fine, but I don't know how people are using it. So what we as web developers should be doing is we should go to GitHub. There's a W3C GitHub, there's a WhatWG GitHub account, and actually comment on the standards that are coming out, because then the APIs are going to look better because we know how we are using things. So we can make better APIs. We can help the browsers be nicer to us. And vanilla web components is one of the cases where the browsers listened to us and said, okay, we give you very low primitives, like very low building blocks, and then libraries can come and build on top of that. And from the years of experience of building web component applications and web components myself, I learned that there's a few tasks, a few things that I keep doing over and over and over and over again, and they bore me to death. And that's where Polymer steps in. So the next thing is going to be, we are looking at Polymer, and particularly Polymer 2.0 and 3.0, and have a look at how it's helping us deal with these things that annoy us in web components. And then last but not least, so Polymer 2.0 was announced earlier this year, and then Polymer 3.0 was announced earlier this year as well. So Polymer 3.0 is in a preview stage right now. The API is mostly the same. There's small differences that are making an important difference, and we're going to talk about that one real quick at the end as well. So let's start with the vanilla web platform. So there's 3 standards, yeah, 4 standards, no. There's templates, there's custom elements, there's Shadow DOM, and there's HTML imports. 4 standards, there's 4 standards that are web components. One, the template element allows us to, have like our declarative markup being ready but not visible and like using it all over again. The shadow DOM encapsulates the internals of our components. Custom elements allow us to create new elements, new HTML tags, and HTML imports allow us to import them into other web applications. It would be a very basic talk. I'm skipping that. There's lots of talks available. You can go to webcomponents.org to learn more about vanilla web components. What I'm going to focus about then is what is it actually that we are doing when we are using web components, vanilla web components. Well, first things first, if we are writing an HTML element, we are extending a class. Because if you ever thought about it, what is the DOM actually? Well, what happens is the browser takes the HTML source code, processes it, and basically like takes out the individual bits and goes like, this is a div. So I'm creating an instance of a class div element, and then I'm filling it with the data. And then this is a button, so I'm creating an instance of the button class and filling it with the data. And then I'm kind of like managing that, like linking it to the visual bits as well. So that's what the browser does. That's what the DOM is, a bunch of classes. If you know object-oriented programming, you know how this works, because you're just creating a new instance of a class. And when we are creating a new component, a new web component, what we're doing is we are creating a new subclass. We are inheriting from a class that already exists. And in this case, for most cases, it's going to be HTML element, but you can inherit from other things as well. Div element, anchor element, button element, image element, whatever your base class should be. And then we're going to probably want to not have all the things that we're doing inside our element be available to the outside world. Because it's like McDonald's, really, right? So you have like the nice facing customer side where there's like a person going, hey, so what would you like? What can I get you? And then you go cheeseburger and fries, and then you get not a cheeseburger, and you are no. So basically the idea is you have like this layer of abstraction. You have an outside facing nice thing that you talk to, and then the kitchen. I don't know about you, but I'm not really interested in seeing how it's made, really. So we have to kind of like have that abstraction as well, because we want the gory details of our component to not be visible to the world, so that no one accidentally, breaks things. So we have a shadow DOM instance. So we are creating the shadow DOM, and then we are loading a template, and we are putting the template inside the shadow DOM, and then we are filling in the template with the actual data. So if you have a name tag component, and the user gives you a name, then you're taking that name, you're taking your name tag template, you're putting the name in the template where it belongs. And then you allow the user to use it, and you do that by exposing an API. Now, what is an API in HTML? What does it look like? What is an API? How do HTML elements communicate with each other, or the user communicating, or the developer communicating with the HTML elements? Attributes. Image source equals lol JPEG. That's the API. it's literally like image.load this thing. So we are basically just calling methods. And we have to sync them so that, because there's, on JavaScript, on the objects, there's properties as well. So image.src, right? So we have the src attribute, and we have the src property. So, is it the same thing? No, it's not the same thing. And you can see that if you look at things like, oh, forget it. I don't have a good example right now. So anyway, you have to sync these two. All right, sure. And we have to do that for every freaking element we're building. And there's other things as well. We have to, figure out what the things are, and then like update the template and all that kind of stuff on runtime. It looks more or less like this. So when we are starting a new web component, what we're doing is we're defining our new class, in this case, my element, and we extend from the HTML element. All right. And then we call the constructor of HTML element. That's always very important to do first, because if you're not doing it first, everything breaks. And then we create our shadow root here. Ignore that bit for a bit. It's explained very well on webcomponents.org. And that's how we start our component. Okay, this component does nothing. Good job. A bunch of lines of code. So to make it do something, we're going to do a little more work. And now comes the bits and pieces that are a little tricky, unfortunately. So first things first, document. Well, that's easy, like document.body or document.query selector. We know that it's like it's searching our document. But what happens if you have an application, an index.html, that is loading my element.html? What is document? I have two documents. Which one is it? Now, you might assume, hey, document is just the document that I'm in right now, but that's not true. Document is always the application document. So if index.html loads any components, document is this document here, not the loaded component document. So the first thing that is annoying is we have to figure out where our template lives in from our component document. So now our component document, what we're doing is we're asking document, which is the application document, dot current script, which is the script tag that we are in, which is in our component document. And then we're asking for the owner document, which is the component document. What? But okay, someone thought that's a good idea. That's all right. And then we have to get our template and the content of that template. And then so this function is called, this connected callback is called once our element is being put into the application. This is when someone's using our element. This is the moment of truth where we can go and shine. So what we're doing then is we're saying, okay, give me my shadow root and import the template and all its children and then update that template. So we can then go like this .shadowroot.query selector span .text content gleich name or something like that. So basically, this is what we have to do to get something on screen. This is the minimum you do to get something on screen. And then, you know, why am I having this? All right, oh yeah. So I'm not sure what this slide was supposed to say. This slide here says we have attributes, right? So for instance, if we have like an alert box component that looks a little nicer than the browser alert does. So we want to give it a message. So how can the developer give it a message? How can I, as the user of that my element thing, give it a message? Well, I have two possibilities. I write HTML and I say my element space message equals quotes message, like hello world. All right, okay, I can do that. But then we have to somehow update the thing as well, because you can also use JavaScript. You can do like document query selector my element dot message. And these two are not the same things. One is the attribute, and one is the property. So what we want is, when I use one or the other one gets updated as well. Doesn't happen automatically, because it is a very low-level building block. So what I do instead is, I'm saying, hey, whenever the message attribute is changed, please call the attribute changed callback with the name of the attribute that has been changed, the previous value and the new value. And then I set myself a private property message to the new value. In this case, I'm cheating a bit because I'm not having as much space on the slide. So obviously, if you have multiple attributes, you wanna make sure that you're setting the right one based on the name. But in this case, I only have one attribute, so I'm like, yeah, if message is being changed, if someone goes like set attribute message, new message, then we are updating this. And then it goes on, because we have to then update the DOM. So now the message has changed. Okay, great. But how am I actually updating the DOM? Well, what you do is, you have a function, for instance, update DOM in this case, which would be, I didn't have the space, here I would call update DOM, and then I get my shadow root, and then I search for the element where the message is supposed to go, and I put it in there. Oh, that's quite a lot of code. So basically, we have to do this all over again. This is what you have to do in every web component you're writing. Every time you're setting up your attributes, you're setting up your properties, you're syncing them, you're loading the template, you're putting in a shadow DOM. So you're basically writing I would say like 20, 30 lines of code just to get that off the ground. You haven't actually written any like logic yet. You haven't done the actual thing you want to do, and that's okay. It is supposed to be a low-level thing. Web component standards are there to be as low level as possible, so you can do whatever you want and then make a library out of that. So you're saying, oh, I don't want to use that. Isn't there a way to actually not have to write that much code? And luckily there is, and there's a bunch of different ways of doing it these days. So for instance, and I'm excluding things that are not using web components right now. So basically there's Stencil from the Ionic team that provides that. There's Skate that does that. And there's Polymer. And we are all here to talk about Polymer today. All right. So what Polymer really is, it's basically a library. It's a few things. It is a bunch of components that are already there that you can use so you don't have to do them. For instance, like a color picker or a drawer menu, you know, like the little hamburger menu kind of thing that comes in and out, and you can, all that is already there. You don't have to write it yourself. You can use these components as they exist. But also, it is a bunch of tools. So it comes with a library that makes testing your web components easier. Nice. It comes with a library that basically minifies and compresses your web components already. So if you're having like 2 components that load the same third component, then it puts them together in one big file, so you only have one HTTP request, and it removes the duplicates. So that's really nice as well. And it basically, Polymer itself is just a very thin library on top of web component standards that makes it easier and nicer to work with it. And I know that people love magic, but magic sometimes is a bit like a TV remote control. TV remote controls for someone who lived 100 years ago are probably very magic, because it's like, all right, 5, news, sports, cooking, news again, right? It's like you press a button and magically over the air on the other end of the room, a thing switches. That's very nice. Who here has ever experienced a remote control when the batteries were dead? Because it's like, news, news. Sports, news, 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 right? So basically, it doesn't work every now and then. And it's the same with magic. Who here has had a day or like an hour where they were just very sure that what they wrote makes sense, but the framework just didn't do it? I'm with you on that. I was like, okay, update. No, seriously, update. Okay, I'm getting the console, update. Now it works. It's like the batteries are half dead. It's like the remote control thing, like update. And that's not something that you want in your application. So unfortunately, Polymer does not have that much magic. So if you expected magic, I have something for you. Bear with me for a second. You already saw it in one of the pictures, but I thought, you know. All right, let's see. Well, it's magic. It's a unicorn. And as has been said in the introduction, it's a real unicorn. I slaughtered it. No, just kidding. I would never do that, because, you know, unicorns are vengeful. Jesus Christ. Actually, this is kind of nice, because, you know, normally it's really hot on stages because of the lights, but here it's actually not that hot, so I'll just onesie up because it's super fluffy and super warm. This is better. There's one downside of onesies, really, which is there's this very degrading moment where you're buttoning up. Sorry. It's very inappropriate. I'll hide. But then again, everyone keeps telling me you shouldn't turn your back on the audience. I'm like, oh, but, hi. There we go. Now comes the best bit. This is better. All right. So, no magic there. If you want magic, just watch me do my thing. I don't know what my thing is, but we'll figure it out. So Polymer is basically just adding things that we would have to do anyways by creating a subclass of HTML element. And so what we want to do is, we're not going to use HTML element directly, but we are actually using this subclass, or it's a mix-in really, but it doesn't, the semantics do not matter at this point. So instead of going, my element extends from HTML element, we are extending from polymer.element. And what we can then do is also, if we don't want to do like all the template loading ourselves, Polymer gives us this taco technique that we're going to see in a slide, upcoming slide, that allows us to automatically associate the template with the component. So it automatically loads the template for us, so we do not have to do it. It's no magic. All it does is it has a wrapping element, and it goes, so this template and this element go together, so I'm loading it into a shadow DOM for it. That's all it does. There's no magic. It's just doing the things that we would have done before. We did them on a slide before. And also it does the property attribute sync for us. So we are basically just telling Polymer, hey, these are the attributes and properties that I want. Please make them sync. Whenever one thing changes, the other thing should change as well. We can disable that though, or actually we have to opt into that. So if we don't want that for performance reasons, we can disable that explicitly as well. Because it's no magic. It's doing what we are doing, and it basically just goes like, do you want me to? Yeah, all right, I'll do it. So that's really nice. It also gives us things like multi-property observers and actually observers as well. And all it does is, if you have seen this before, if you have used ES6 classes, you can define your setters and getters, right? So whenever you're changing a property, if I say message equals YOLO, and that's a different message, then the setter is called in the class. And Polymer sets that up for us and asks us, do you want me to let you know, like, do you want me to call you back when that happens? And we can say, yeah, please, and then we get it automatically. It's no magic, it's just ES6. All right, and it does data binding. So instead of having to like manually do the DOM updates ourselves, it gives us a way to do that in a nicer way automatically for us, and it's not magic. So this is the Polymer taco. So you see, our originally my element still exists, but it now lives as a subclass of Polymer.element. It's the biggest change. And also we give it an is attribute that returns the name of this element. And we are using that as the tag name as well. So you can now type my-element in angle brackets, and you're creating an instance of this. And also we have a template here that says yay. And here we are having the same thing. So we're having an ID, and we're having the name of the element. And that's what happens. Polymer runs the code for this DOM module, and it goes, all right, so my ID is myElem, so I'm waiting for a class myElem to come along. And I have a template. Okay, so I'm keeping the class name and the template. And then the class is being created, and Polymer goes, ah, all right. So I have this template over here for this class. So what I'll do is I'll go and put it in. I'll put the template into the shadow root for this one. It automatically happens. It's not, if you read the code, it is not that complicated, which is nice. And then we can do things like this. So if we had our properties and attributes discussion, so I say I have a bunch of properties, and for instance I have message, and it has a type, and this type is useful because it automatically allows Polymer to figure out. So you know that in HTML, whatever you get as an attribute is a string. So if I say like number of items in HTML, like my element number equals in quotes 5, that's a string. But if I say number here, Polymer goes, ah, so I got a string, but it should be a number, so I'm passing it into a number. It's doing what we would do anyway. It's not doing any magic, which is nice. We can give it a standard value, so that's not empty beforehand. And we can even say, so this is for performance reasons, you have to opt in. We can say whenever the attribute changes, or whenever the property changes, update the other one, so that it makes sure that these two are always in sync. Okay, well, I didn't know that I had this highlight. What we can also do is, we can say, also for performance reasons, do data binding both ways. What does that mean? It means that, imagine I have a component that is a color picker, all right? So I have a property that is color, or selected color, or something. And now inside my component, I change that color. But the application might want to know about this because maybe they're like using it somewhere. Probably they're using it somewhere. So how can I make that happen? How would you do that in vanilla JavaScript? With an element, with an event. Did you know that who here knew that you can have your own events? You can create your own DOM events. Everyone else, you can create your own DOM events. We'll see in a second how. And this little property here, this notify true, says whenever this property changes, and I know that because I have an ES6 setter on it, I'll send an event that has the name of the property dash changed as the type. So what I can do is I can do color picker dot at event listener selected color dash change, and then I have a function that gets called whenever the color is being changed. It's vanilla. It's the platform. It's not magic. It's not custom. So what it does basically for data binding is it allows us to send these events. That's great. It also parses the template content for placeholders. And when it finds a placeholder, it makes itself a little node like, ah, this is where it goes in the DOM tree. And then it helps you automatically update that. So you don't have to manually, do like the query selector, the text content, all that stuff. It does that for you. It also sets up observers. So when you're saying, hey, I wait for an event, for a color changed event from my color picker, and I'm binding this thing to my template, I have like selected color in my template somewhere, then it goes, all right, so hey, color picker, add event listener, color dash changed. And then when that happens, my listener is going to take the new color and it's going to put it back into the DOM. It's not very complicated to actually build that yourself. And it does the automatic, if you set notify true, it also does that for the components upwards. So this is basically what it does. Actually, now we'll go on it. There's a little quiz though. Setters, ES6 setters. Here we're having a class, and it has a property underscore things, and it's an empty array. And then we have a getter things, which gets it, and then we have a setter things, which sets it to what we're given. And then we have a piece of code that says Q, which is a new instance of this class, thinks push A. Who here thinks the setter is being called? Who here thinks the setter is not being called? All right. And unfortunately, if we are doing this, the people who said it's not going to be called are right. Because the setter is only when we change the value. So if we would say Q things equals new array, that would call the setter. A push, a pop, a slice, a splice, a shift, an unshift, whatever, will not call the setter. And the problem is, you might think, oh yeah, I have this property here, and it's type array, so I'm be good. And then you find out it's a remote control situation again, where it does not work. And you're like, JavaScript is shit, and it's not. It's not obvious why this doesn't work, but it comes for a reason. The reason is, the setter gets called when the reference in memory is being changed. If I append something to the existing object, I'm not changing the reference. This is also a pitfall with const as well. If you have in your JavaScript code const array, and then you're wondering why you can still push to it, it's the same reason. The object itself does not move around in memory. It's the same object. It's just its contents have changed. But there's ways around it. So what we could do is we could write a function. We could make it read-only and then just write a function that allows us to call this notify path things, which means Polymer goes, okay, I should have a look at it again, and then it goes, oh yeah, no, these two are not the same. Like it was different before, it's different now. I'll probably do something about this. Or you can use a helper. So Polymer comes with array helpers. For the array case, there is a this push inside the element that you can do, and then you say, I want to push A to things, and then it automatically fires like the listeners and change things, and it's going to be fine. This is how you do your event things, and this is how Polymer does it as well. So when we say two-way data binding, what we mean is it has a setter for the property, and whenever that property changes or is changed by calling the data binding methods again, it creates a new custom event with a property name dash change, and this is how you can create your own events as well. It's no magic. This is the platform. This is the web platform. This has been in browsers since many years. This is nothing new. And yet no one seems to know it. So you say, I have a new custom event, and I want it to be this event so that someone can go like, add event listener, message dash changed, and then I can give it details, so you can go event.details.value this message, and you actually get like the message back. So you can put in anything you want. You can make them bubbling, you can make them non-bubbling, you can do all sorts of things with this API. And then how do you fire such an event, or how do you fire any event? This dispatch event has been around since ages, and it's not a specific Polymer function. This entire code block here, none of that is Polymer specific. This works with every web component that follows this convention, works with a Polymer component out of the box. So if you have a web component, you've written that without Polymer, and you are making sure that your event is called message changed and contains the value as the details, Polymer will work as if it would be a Polymer element. And the other way around, if you have a Polymer element in your non-Polymer application, and you want to figure out what happened, like when something changes, you just add an event listener for these events and you'll be good. That's what it is about. And works really well with things like Redux and stuff, because you can just listen to the event and then figure out if the change is okay, and then you can like override the message property, for instance, if it's not okay. So you basically get integration with other frameworks as well, which is really nice. So to sum that up, Polymer really is not like a framework. It's a library, and really what it boils down to, Polymer is an opinionated use of web technologies or web component standards. Because they are doing these things. Like the reason for giving it the property-change name for the events, that's just beyond me. I don't care. If you don't like it, that's not wrong. If you don't want to use events, if you want to do something else, that's perfectly fine. You can use Rx in your web component and do like streams and have other things subscribe to it. That's perfectly fine. That is absolutely okay. But it turns out that the way that Polymer does things is particularly nice to work with other libraries and frameworks in the web. So it's very lightweight as well, and that's pretty nice. And I kind of like that. And there's one more thing. So we've talked about Polymer 2.0, but there is Polymer 3.0 already in the preview phase. It's going to come at some point in the future. What's the big difference? Well, the biggest difference is that it uses ES6 instead of HTML imports. So you can now, beforehand you basically wrote an HTML document and you had to somehow distribute that. How do you distribute HTML documents? NPM is not quite good for that. So they decided to go with Bower. Who here knows Bower? Who here uses it? Still. Okay, that's like 2 people. Thumbs up. Bower was a front-end focused package manager, or is a front-end focused package manager for JavaScript and HTML and CSS and all that. But it's no longer actively being developed because NPM and Yarn came around, and Yarn in particular has like flat dependency tree. So it's like the biggest reason for Bower was to have a flattened dependency tree, and we are not needing that in particular anymore because we have Yarn and we have the NPM ecosystem. So you can basically like have one side with a bazillion, million, trillion things that you can get from. And so right now what we had to do is we had to like NPM here, Bower here, and you had to kind of update both, and that was a bit annoying. So Polymer said, you know, Bower not being maintained anymore, ES modules coming into the browsers. It's in all the browsers except for Firefox, where it's behind the flag. Actually, all the browsers. It's behind the flag in Firefox, which is going to change soon. And Edge is developing. It's under development for Edge. It's going to come soon. I think it actually has landed now. And I think Firefox might have removed it in the latest version as well. Anyway, so ES modules allow us to write a JavaScript module as we like our JavaScript class and all that, export that, and then import that into other pieces. And that's nice because it works well with Webpack. It works well with other development workflows that have like basically a Node.js or JavaScript-based workflow. So that's really nice. And the problem is that we have to do something. Unfortunately, HTML imports have not gotten the response that you would have imagined because they turned out to be really hard to implement in browsers. So Chrome went, yeah, HTML imports, awesome. We're gonna, you know, we implement this, we're gonna have a good time, everyone's gonna love it. And they went ahead and like, hey, we shipped it. But then other browsers like Firefox goes, I don't know. You know, it's pretty weird and pretty tricky, and no one's doing it so far besides you all. There's ES6 modules coming, and they're like a super huge change in how we are loading the resources in the browser. Maybe we're waiting a bit. And then Safari goes, you know what, no. ES6 modules is the thing that we're working on. We don't see any reason for HTML imports to be there, and we don't think it's well thought through from the point of our view. And Edge goes, yeah, I don't know. We're pretty busy with ES6 modules, and you know the other people have said as well, so not sure if we want to do that. So Polymer is now at like 13 or 10 kilobytes, I think, gzipped. But then you need polyfills. And cool enough is that these 3 are shipping Shadow DOM, custom elements, the template element, all that already since a few months, really. And Edge is actually working on it. Edge is shipping template elements. The other things are coming. But none of them considers, none besides Chrome considers shipping HTML imports anymore. So we had to figure out a way to do that. There's a proposal of having HTML modules, but that's going to take a few years until it actually happens. Google for HTML modules, go to the GitHub discussion and discuss with people. If you liked HTML imports, or if you like the idea of having to say, like, I import this HTML document and then I can use bits and pieces of it, if that's your thing and it's my thing, definitely go there, comment, talk to the other developers, talk to the people making the standards to help shape the standard for the future. But what do we do in the meantime? Well, we're going to write ES6 modules, and they're looking slightly different, because in ES6 modules, you write JavaScript. It's not an HTML document anymore. So how do you do your template? There's a few ways. Polymer 3.0 going the way of saying, we're just using template strings, and then this is how the data binding works. So the name would be filled in from this .name. So this is what they're proposing. There's another library, also from the Polymer team, called lit HTML, which gives you an addition to that, where you have like a few more features. So that's what the next couple of months are going to look like. If you want to hear more about ES6 modules and Polymer, definitely go check out the blog and check out the preview branch. There's a 3.0 preview branch. You can use it to tinker around with it. Do not use that in production just yet. And with that, Дякую, thank you very much for listening. I think we still have time for questions. And also just find me, I'm around on the conference. I have a 360-degree camera, we can take selfies and shit, and yeah.